What if the greatest masterpieces of ancient civilization are not sudden beginnings, but breathtaking summits? Not because the evidence of their creation is entirely missing, but because what survives is so far beyond expectation that it demands we rethink the capabilities of the ancient mind. Craftsmanship that rivals modern technology. Political thinking that echoes thousands of years before modern democracy. Visual languages that synthesized centuries of scattered experiments into flawless perfection. Objects that carry within them the weight of generations. These are 5 real artifacts. And every single one of them contains a story of human genius that history is only just beginning to fully understand. The Mask of Tutankhamun. In the autumn of 1922, a team led by British archaeologist Howard Carter broke through a sealed doorway deep beneath the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. Behind it lay a tomb that had remained untouched for over 3,000 years. The air inside was thick, the dust undisturbed, and resting within the innermost coffin, draped over the rapt face of a young pharaoh, was an object so breathtaking that Carter reportedly stood motionless for a long moment before saying a single word. The death mask of Tutankhamun was crafted from solid gold and inlaid with lapis lazuli, carnelian, obsidian, turquoise, and colored glass, making it not merely a funerary covering, but a statement of impossible refinement. The gold alone weighs more than 10 kilograms, hammered to a consistent thickness across its entire surface with a precision that would challenge skilled craftsmen today. The inlaid collar across the shoulders contains hundreds of individually cut and placed stones, each fitted with an accuracy where no adhesive error, no slight misalignment, and no variation in depth is visible to the naked eye, even after millennia. What unsettles researchers most is the staggering metallurgical mastery behind it. The gold used in the mask shows evidence of deliberate alloying, a controlled mixture designed to achieve a specific tone and durability. While tomb paintings from the era show us the bustling workshops where ancient metalworkers smelted and cast their ores, the mask itself represents an absolute apex of execution. The fusing of dissimilar materials across its surface required an understanding of how different substances behave under heat, how they expand, contract, and bond. That knowledge was accumulated, refined, and passed between generations of master craftsmen whose individual names have been lost to time. The mask also carries inscriptions. Spells drawn from the Book of the Dead, carved into the gold with a steadiness of hand that suggests either extraordinary calm or extraordinary tool control. The hieroglyphs wrap around the shoulders and down the back, functioning not as decoration, but as protection, a spoken technology meant to guide the soul of the king through the underworld. Some scholars have noted that the eyes of the mask hold a quality difficult to describe scientifically. The obsidian pupils are positioned within their settings with a depth and intentionality that creates the impression of focus, of presence. Visitors have reported feeling observed. Whether this was the intention of the craftsman or a consequence of their precision remains an open question that no analysis has resolved. The Bust of Nefertiti. In 1912, in the ruins of an ancient sculptor's workshop at Amarna in Egypt, a German archaeological team uncovered a painted limestone bust buried beneath centuries of sand and debris. It was intact. The colors had not faded in any significant way. The face looking up from the ground was serene, symmetrical, and so realistically rendered that one member of the excavation team reportedly said it felt like meeting someone. The Bust of Nefertiti, Queen of Egypt and wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten, is considered by many art historians to be among the finest portraits ever produced by any civilization in any era. That statement is not hyperbole. It is a conclusion drawn from examination of the object itself. The sculpting demonstrates a grasp of human facial anatomy that rivals Renaissance portraiture created more than 2,000 years later. And modern technology has revealed exactly how this was achieved. CT scans of the bust show that beneath the flawless stucco surface lies a carved limestone core depicting a real, aging woman, complete with wrinkles around the mouth and a slight bump on the nose. The sculptor didn't conjure perfection from nothing. They meticulously observed reality, and then applied layers of stucco like ancient photo editing, elevating a realistic portrait into an immortal ideal. The pigments used to paint the bust have been analyzed extensively. The blues and greens came from copper compounds, the reds from iron oxides. The combination and application method suggests a mixing knowledge that went far beyond trial and error. The colors were layered in sequences that preserved their vibrancy through differential oxidation, a masterclass in ancient chemistry. What deepens the mystery is the asymmetry. The right eye of the bust is set with an inlaid rock crystal. The left eye socket is entirely empty. For decades, scholars argued this was damage or an unfinished state. But more recent analysis has suggested the empty socket may have been intentional, a deliberate choice by the artist whose meaning has never been recovered. Some propose it reflected a spiritual concept. Others suggest the bust was a sculptor's master model, never intended for public display, kept in the workshop as a reference piece to train the next generation of artisans. The Cyrus Cylinder. In 1879, in the ruins of ancient Babylon, in what is now southern Iraq, a small clay cylinder was unearthed from the foundations of a temple. It was covered from end to end in cuneiform script. 45 lines of text pressed into the clay when it was still soft, then fired hard, then buried for more than 2,000 years beneath the rubble of an empire. When the inscription was translated, scholars found themselves reading something that defied the brutal norms of the ancient world. The Cyrus Cylinder is a proclamation issued by Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, following his conquest of Babylon in 539 BCE. But its content is not the bloody record of victory that such objects typically preserve. It does not list the defeated. It does not describe slaughter or the subjugation of peoples. Instead, it announces the restoration of displaced populations to their homelands, the return of sacred statues confiscated by previous rulers, the abolition of forced labor practices, and the right of peoples within the empire to worship their own gods freely. The cylinder predates the Magna Carta by nearly 1,800 years, and yet the principles it articulates, protection from forced displacement, the obligation of a ruler to care for the well-being of those he governs, are principles the modern world still debates implementing completely. What historians find most brilliant is the strategy behind it. Proclamations of this kind do not emerge from nothing. The Cyrus Cylinder is the staggering climax of a long, ancient Mesopotamian tradition of Masharim edicts of justice issued by earlier kings to restore cosmic and social order. Cyrus did not invent these concepts out of thin air. He brilliantly adapted a deeply rooted local tradition and weaponized it for a new era. He took the ancient language of justice and used it to legitimize Persian rule, presenting conquest as liberation. It required a civilization capable of thinking in profound moral terms, and a ruler shrewd enough to scale those concepts to a global empire. The standard of long before writing had spread across the ancient world. Long before the empires whose names still echo through history had formed, a city called sat at the edge of the fertile lowlands between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in what is now southern Iraq. It was one of the earliest urban centers ever built. And inside one of its royal tombs, buried alongside the dead sometime around 2600 BCE, was a small wooden box decorated on all four sides with intricate mosaic panels made from shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli. It is called the Standard of and no one knows exactly what it was for. The two main panels, each roughly the size of a large book, depict scenes of war and peace with a visual storytelling precision that feels modern in its design logic. The war panel shows a Sumerian army in formation, chariots crushing enemies underfoot, prisoners being led in lines, a king receiving captives. The figures are arranged in horizontal registers, each row telling a sequential story, building from ground-level soldiers to the king himself at the apex. The composition follows a visual grammar, a logic of hierarchy, movement, and narrative that reflects sophisticated thought about how images communicate meaning. The peace panel shows feasting, musicians playing instruments, attendants carrying goods, animals being led. Each figure is cut from shell and inlaid with a consistency of scale and proportion, suggesting the work of trained specialists who had practiced this craft extensively. What archaeologists found most striking was the lapis lazuli. This deep blue stone, which gives both panels their vivid background color, does not exist anywhere near ancient Mesopotamia. The nearest source is thousands of kilometers away in what is now northeastern Afghanistan. This means that more than 4,500 years ago, the people of Ur were participating in trade networks of continental scale. Trade at that distance requires organization, trust, record-keeping, agreements between peoples who likely shared no common language, and a system of value that allowed one thing to be exchanged for another across enormous stretches of time and space. The standard of Ur is evidence not of one civilization, but of many, cooperating across distances that most people today would struggle to cross in a comfortable vehicle. What it was actually used for remains unresolved. The name standard suggests it may have been carried on a pole as a military or ceremonial object. Some believe it was a resonating box for a musical instrument. Others think it served as a piece of furniture placed inside the tomb, specifically for the afterlife. The answer, if it exists anywhere, has not yet been found. The Narmer Palette, at the very edge of recorded history, in the soil of ancient Egypt near the city of Hierakonpolis, archaeologists in the late 19th century uncovered a flat piece of dark green siltstone, roughly the size of a large human hand, carved in relief on both sides with images of breathtaking clarity and intentional composition. It depicts a king performing acts of conquest and ceremony. The king's name, indicated by symbols in a small rectangular frame near the top, is Narmer. This object, known as the Narmer Palette, is thought to date to approximately 3100 BCE. It is widely considered one of the earliest historical documents in existence. What it records is the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt into a single kingdom, an event so significant that it established the template for 3,000 years of continuous civilization. But the manner in which that event is recorded is itself a triumph, because the Narmer Palette presents the definitive visual language that Egyptian art would use for the next 3 millennia. The conventions are all there. The hierarchical scaling of figures, where the most important person is drawn largest. The composite perspective, where the human body is shown with the head in profile, but the eye drawn frontally. The torso facing forward, but the legs in side view. The use of horizontal registers to separate different parts of a narrative. The strict posture of authority in the ruling figure, one arm raised, the other gripping a defeated enemy. Looking at it, it seems as though someone sat down one afternoon and decided, definitively, how Egyptian art would look for the next 100 generations. But the truth is even more fascinating. The Narmer Palette is a masterclass in synthesis. In the archaeological record, we have found older, cruder pre-dynastic artifacts, fragmented palettes, and painted pottery, where these artistic rules were being messily tested and developed over centuries. The learning curve happened. But the Narmer Palette is the spectacular moment where that curve reached its peak. It is a flawless, finished distillation of an artistic tradition finally realizing its own power. The palette holds another layer of meaning beyond its visual language. It is carved with a political theology already fully articulated. The king is not merely a military leader. He is shown enacting cosmic order. The smiting of enemies is not simple violence. It is the restoration of balance between chaos and structure, a concept that Egyptian religion would hold sacred for thousands of years. The Narmer Palette does not read like a beginning. It reads like a grand summary, like someone distilling into a small flat stone everything that a civilization had fought, experimented, and strived to learn about itself, its power, and its place in the story of the world. These 5 objects share something beyond their age and their craftsmanship. Each one arrived in its moment, carrying the weight of something longer and deeper than the moment itself. A mask that required generations of metallurgical knowledge. A bust whose sculptor understood the anatomy beneath the ideal. A cylinder that weaponized ancient moral philosophy for a new empire. A mosaic box connected to trade networks spanning an entire continent. A palette that took centuries of scattered artistic experiments and forged them into perfection. History moves forward in the records we keep, but these objects remind us that behind every masterpiece lies a vast, often invisible history of human trial, error, and staggering genius. The objects remain, shining summits of a world we are still striving to understand.